The National Education Policy of 2020 was approved by the Union Cabinet on the 29th of July, and it plans to make many sweeping changes in the education system across the country, while at the same time reforming India's system of education by the year 2030. It aims to provide equitable access to the highest quality education for all learners irrespective of their social or economic background. The HRD Ministry, also known as the Ministry of Human Resource and Development, will now be named as the Ministry of Education, which is meant to suggest a greater focus on educational reforms. Hi, this is Amir from the Upfront. Join me in decoding the noteworthy features and, of course, the major loopholes of National Education Policy 2020. The changes in the education policy can be categorized into primary and higher education. I will start by breaking down the structural changes that will take place in the primary education. Among other things, the new policy of 2020 seeks reform in the areas of structure and curriculum of school education, with a focus on multilingualism and teacher training. Its vision includes a heavy emphasis on literacy and numeracy. As you and I are aware, that education without proper food and nutrition is pointless. Therefore, this policy has adopted providing free nutritious breakfasts along with the midday meal scheme in government schools, and will also seek to redesign the board examination pattern as well as the imparting of vocational education. In terms of structural change, the National Education Policy of 2020 has proposed that the existing curricular structure be completely modified. The existing pattern, that is 10+2, which involves general education from class 1st to class 10th in the primary and secondary schooling years, and is followed by a specialization in classes 11th and 12th. Well, right now, this existing model will give way to a new proposed curricular structure. The proposed new curricular structure will be divided into 5+3+3+4. It will be as follows. Foundational stage, 3 years of preschool, followed by class 1 and 2. Preparatory stage, classes 3 and 5th. Middle stage, classes 6th and 8th. Higher secondary stage, classes 9th to 12th. The new model also brings into the fold children of the ages 3 to 5. The regulating of early childhood education has been hailed as a positive move. If this regulation is proven to be effective, unhealthy preschooling practices that are rampant in the public and the private sector can be kept in check. If the new policy is implemented correctly, the 5+3+3+4 model could also ensure an unbroken curricular link for the last 4 years of schooling before students pass out of school. NCERT, the National Council of Educational Research and Training, will soon be introducing the curricular framework for the new school structure, which will also include early childhood care by the next academic year. Moving on, let me tell you a bit about the changes which are expected in the higher education. When it comes to higher education, the biggest structural change will be the introduction of 4-year-long bachelor's degree. The 4-year bachelor's program will also have several entry and exit points, which will include a certificate after the first year, a diploma after completing 2 years, a bachelor's degree after the completion of 3 years, and a multidisciplinary bachelor's degree after the completion of 4 years. Well, this may seem to be a healthy practice, but it could also lead to higher dropout rates due to the many exit points readily available after each year of learning. Foreign universities will be allowed to set up campuses in India to promote the internationalization of education. This could lead to the commercialization of education, and education will become less the state's responsibility and more open to private investors who will naturally look towards gaining profits as their primary goal. There could be a divide amongst the people who will have access to education provided by these universities and the rest of the student population utilizing government-run institutions. The NTA, the National Testing Agency, will now take up the added responsibility of conducting entrance exams for admissions into universities across the country, as well as conducting the NEET and JEE main exams. A higher education council will also be set up with the goal of increasing the gross enrollment ratio. It will have subparts to enhance its functioning. These include a number of councils under it. Some of them are a regulatory council, an accreditation council, a grants council, and a general education council.
पूर्व की भांति रहेंगे, लेकिन 4-year degree program with 1-year MA and direct no MPhil, they can go to PhD.
Higher Education Secretary Mr. Amit Khare is reported to have said that the existing MPhil students shall continue their education until the completion of their degrees. New admissions for the program will not be accepted. Of course, along the way, there will be legal and financial challenges. Due to the federal nature of our system of governance, which allows power to be distributed between the center and the state, an item like education has been put on the concurrent list, which means both the center and the state are allowed to make laws on the subject. The presence of a body like the National Higher Education Regulatory Council could be a potential cause of tension for the state. In other words, in effect, the national education policy could fall flat without the cooperation of the states. To implement it legally, the central government will have to work together with the state governments. Voices have been raised against the over-centralization of education in the country, with the introduction of bodies like the HECI, or added responsibilities to bodies like NCERT, the National Assessment Center, the NTA, National Testing Agency, which will have the additional responsibility of conducting entrance exams for universities across the country, as well as conducting NEET and JEE main exams. The concurrent status of education in the Constitution will become void if central bodies like these are given more powers to make drastic changes in education. The ministry has outlined that an increase in the expenditure on education to 6% of the GDP will be adequate to cover the monetary requirements of national education policy. Experts say that one must take into account that an expansion in financing of this scale has not only been proposed but has also not been accomplished for the last 50 years. If anything, since 2014, over the past 6 years, the expenditure on education has only seen cuts in its budget. The subject of the languages used for the medium of instruction in schools will also be a bone of contention for the central and the state governments. The glaring absence of vernacular languages like Urdu in the document seems like an attempt to saffronize education and do this to students at a very young age.
The saffronization of education controversy fails to die down, as now Rajasthan state government plans to follow in the footsteps of Haryana. Rajasthan has decided to go ahead with what it describes as the Indianization of a curriculum.
Even though bilingualism is being encouraged and quality bilingual textbooks have been promised, there is little mention of how these high quality study or teaching materials will be produced on a mass scale. The document also mentions that there will be attempts on the part of the government to incentivize the merits of students belonging to scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and other backward classes as well. But it does not mention reservations for higher education. Similarly, there are several paragraphs of information in the document about teacher training and setting higher standards for B.Ed programs in order to improve the teaching quality. It will set up the NPST, National Professional Standards for Teachers, to ensure an effective recruitment process. But it is very notable that it fails to mention an increase or regulation of the pay that the teachers are currently being offered in the public or the private sectors. There are no concrete measures to enable equitable access to education. The provisions of right to education could be sidelined by factors such as commercialization of education, which will only deny educational equity to future students. Critiques of the policy also claim that there is a lack of clarity in terms of the actual practical implementation of the goals this new educational policy sets. On the whole, the national education policy has some very high hopes for reform and higher enrollment. It hopes to see a 50% gross enrollment ratio for the higher education by the year 2035. But it is very doubtful whether it will be able to see these results very soon. Progress on this urgently relies upon the will of the government to spend the guaranteed 6% of GDP on education alone. Education is the primary driving force for an individual's upliftment. You and I are aware that until and unless India as a country gains optimum literacy, we will continue seeing our society built upon material greed and hunger for power. Without the right education policy, India will continue to see a greater divide among the masses. This divide, if left unchecked, will certainly take our country down a path of illiteracy, rampant poverty, and ever-increasing divide amongst the masses. Wait a minute. Aren't these the same problems that are plaguing our country as I speak? Yes, indeed. Well, as stated earlier, without the right educational policy, the existing problems will only increase in magnitude. If left unchecked, these very problems will eventually stall the overall development of the country. This is something that you and I need to keep in check. Thank you. If you like our video, drop in a like and share it with friends and family. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to hit the bell icon to get notifications for our updates.